Hey, welcome to Season 7, Episode number 7 of the Westeros Gazette. I'm not saying that it's our Season 7 because we've only been doing this for one season. I am saying that this is Season 7 of Game of Thrones. I'm so happy that you've all tuned in. I do this every time. There's 30 seconds to fill here on this template. I've told you 100 times I don't know how to fill it. But what I'm going to tell you is that we've got the all-star crew. Everyone is in the studio for this last episode. We're so glad you joined. Sit back, crack open a cold one, and enjoy! Woo! Alright. Don't you like it? I think it's surprising, guys. You know what I mean?
Keep us on our toes.
Ooh, on your toes. I've got all these, I got all my bros, and my hoes, but Beth is not a hoe. That's not what I meant, of course. I love that. It's a good rap song. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Westeros Gazette.
Classy.
The last Westeros Gazette. Alas, for Season 7. This isn't the last show, for sure, but the last one for Season 7. I do want to thank you all who came on this wild journey with us. We're pouring the bubbly now. Some red ale from Amagang Brewery, right? What's this one called?
A little fire and blood.
A little fire and blood. Yep. Sounds like a bad dinner and the next day. What's happening? Okay.
Like dragons.
Guys, but we do want to thank everybody who's listened to all of the episodes of Westeros Gazette. We thank you. We're considering what's going to happen next. We have no idea, but at least for now, consider this our season finale, along with the season finale that is, of course, the wonderful world of Game of Thrones. Remember that you can subscribe on iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher. However you're currently listening to this now, we'd really appreciate it if you shared it around. If you're a Game of Thrones fan, share it with another Game of Thrones fan. That would mean a lot to us. Tell them that, hey, you should check out this podcast that's done.
Dude, yeah, so I walked in this morning to the second floor and I heard people like over the cube walls talking about Game of Thrones. I was like, oh, the first floor is just as nerdy as the second floor.
That's wonderful. Guys, can we just cheers real quick? We've got our glasses. We've got everything poured. Let's just take a moment and cheers to Game of Thrones. L'chaim to Game of Thrones. Everyone, I like that we all still do that from college where you had to slam it back down on the table first.
Oh, you have to.
I was not old enough to drink in college.
Oh, that's good beer. That's nice. That's good. Yeah. Some good fire blood.
It does not taste like what it smells like.
Well, guys, so as a reminder, if you've already listened to our Rapid Fire Nights, that was sort of our quick 20-minute reaction to the finale that we recorded last night. But alas, we were without John, but we are now back with John.
Hello.
Here in the studio, along with Seth, Beth, and Joe. So we are ready to break down the season finale of Game of Thrones. I've said it 100 times. I don't know where to start, though. I think that's part of my problem. I mean, how do we get this thing going?
Enter Joe.
Yeah.
However will I get this going? Segue.
Yeah, we can kick it off.
The master of scenes.
So again, like, this is a hard episode because there's a lot of quick scenes, so we're going to just try to group them together, and instead of starting with the shortest one, I actually want to start with what probably is the longest, like, linear action and the most of what we want to talk about. So anyways, we open on...
Can you give me a test real quick so I can make sure the soundboard's working? Like, what are one of the scenes you definitely want to cover?
Oh, one of the scenes?
Yeah, like the death of a major character. Real quick.
The death of motherfucking Littlefinger.
We're good. We got it. All right,
sounds like it's working.
We're on it today.
You got it locked in.
You're really prepped for it.
Locked and loaded. All right, so we open, you guys should stop me, but I think like we can kind of get through a lot of this beginning piece before we actually start breaking down what we see. But essentially, we open up on Grey Worm. We see the Unsullied outside of King's Landing. We see the Lannisters standing guard, preparing for battle. Bronn's essentially in charge, walking around telling, people to get more oil for some reason. I guess they're just like preparing for any kind of attack. And they have like this little quip again, and it's again like Jaime and Bronn having these moments between each other where Jaime's obviously a long-term soldier, a long-term Lannister, and Bronn's kind of like in it for himself, like looking out for himself, making sure that he's going to be okay as they go through. And then the Dothraki swarm up in between all the Unsullied, and Bronn's essentially like, yeah, I think we're about to be the downtrodden. So that's the opening scene. It seems pretty prominent, but that's the only time we see the Unsullied or the Dothraki or even any other Lannisters.
I think it's important, and not to jump around too much again, but like I think it's important that we saw that moment from Jaime, though. That we saw that moment where he again sees how outnumbered and how unlikely it is to win this war. When he sees the Force, he's confronted again. He's reminded of the Loot Train battle. He sees, the two dragons in the pit. He sees the Unsullied lined up outside. He sees the Dothraki. The OCD in me could not handle the perfectly lined up Unsullied and then just like the meandering horde in front of them.
God damn it. They held their lines really well, though.
Yeah,
those
they
horses were charging through, and none of them flinched.
They're not scared, man. They ain't got no dicks.
But what a great, for Dany, I thought it was really cool that it showed, the dichotomy between, she's won the loyalty for two very, very different groups of people. I thought that was really cool to see.
Yep.
I will say this. There's this cool pan out when they show Euron's fleet, and then they pan to the left, and you see Dany's ships, and what was this, huge armada at the end of Season 6 was down to 5 ships. That's how much damage they did throughout the season on what fleet she had.
Yeah, is that how we take it? So, obviously that's
saw.
the next scene, but yeah, that's
I
what
don't know if what we saw there at the very beginning
It's fair.
was
Everything.
everything. Yeah, basically.
And I also want to just bring up the question of the Westeros portal that got the Unsullied out of their stranded Casterly Rock moment back to King's Landing, which again, I'm not gonna shit on that too much. That's a prime example of how we need to move things along quickly, and not everything is going to get the explanation it needs. Moving into the last season, but it was just that moment where you're like, oh shit, they're just there. I thought that was going to be something that had to be addressed. How are you going to go back and, even if it was and maybe this is just something in general that I wish this season did a little bit more, was a line that explains. And I don't think we get a lot of lines that explain. And just something that was just, hey, you should take the ships over and pick up Grey Worm or something. Even if it was just as simple as that, we never got that. And then all of a sudden they're all lined up and there. And to me, that was just kind of maybe strange, but not a deal breaker for me by any means.
I completely agree. I feel like that's the kind of thing that we would have gotten seasons 1 through 5, even 6. But in season 7, it's a deal breaker, no go. We're moving straight through and on to the next thing. And I do think that's really affected. And we talked about it, I think, in our rapid fire, and that it really changed the dynamic about a lot of those big moments that would hit. And I personally didn't feel like the punches landed quite the same because you didn't have that build up, that lead up to those big moments. So I don't know. I wonder if they could have stretched it even. And normally I feel the exact opposite when it comes to a show. I want them to just, oh my gosh, get to the point, stop stretching it out so long.
No foreplay.
Yeah, no foreplay. But I feel like on this one, they the last two, this season, and what I'm anticipating will be the same in the next season. They've just cut it too short. I could have used just one more.
But with the particular scene we're talking about, not talking about the Westeros portal in general, but I mean, did you really need to see the Lannister army pulling out of Highgarden, withdrawing back to King's Landing because they lost the Battle of the Lutrain? That was the next logical step. There was no reason for them to try to meet the Unsullied in the field.
Nice.
They would have lost if they met the Unsullied and the Dothraki in the field. King's Landing was the only logical place for the Lannister army to fall back to. And I think we didn't need to see all that. It would have added to the story, but it wasn't necessary to watch.
Yeah, and I totally agree.
Foreplay is always necessary, boys. Okay, it's the only woman in this room.
The only woman
I just
standing
gotta
on the
throw it out there, just a little. You don't need to go all the way in.
Oh, shit.
Well, I didn't mean to take it there.
All right. So
I'm
look,
not sure I heard you what you said.
here.
It's okay. Don't worry
Listen
about
back to it, man. So, all right. What I'm trying to say is that yes, no, we didn't need that part of the story, right? We didn't need to see how they got back there. But if, for example, this was a 7-episode season, maybe if this was a 10-episode normal season, it's always been, and I'm saying pie in the sky, budget wasn't an issue or whatever stopped them from doing 10 episodes in the beginning didn't matter. If we had 10 episodes, maybe we would have that opportunity to have a more fleshed out heist plan of a frozen walker. Maybe we'd have the I'm a little surprised that we didn't get more of a character study, for lack of a better term, on Grey Worm in Highgarden, and feeling like he's separated and needs to get back to Missandei, because they literally set that up. They set up the moment that they actually became intimate, you started cheering for that relationship, and then all of a sudden, my first thought was when I saw him stranded at Highgarden, looking out at Euron's fleet and seeing all of his ships destroyed, or Casterly Rock, and seeing all of his ships destroyed. was like, well, fuck, now he can't get back to Missandei, and they just had something. And then to come back to Grey Worm at the beginning of this episode and not even literally 5 seconds. Yeah. I know there's a lot in this episode that they had to get in, I guess that at the heart of that is my point. Like, if this was a 10-episode season, we'd have the opportunity to go down some of these side streets on the plot and explore them a little further like we've had in the previous seasons, which made those previous seasons feel like an adaptation of the books, where this feels like a straight TV show now.
Yeah, and to your point, it like kind of just hurts a little bit because of the writing. I think is a little bit not shaky, but a little bit not as tight as it has been for a long time. So then we get like what we were talking about. We get Tyrion sailing towards King's Landing. He's with Jon and Davos and the Hound and some other people. Jon questions why 1 million people would want to live like that in King's Landing, really close to each other, and the Hound whacks the White's box and he screams. so then we like get to Cersei and Qyburn, and Cersei tells the Mountain, if anything goes wrong, kill Dany first, my brother, and then the one that calls himself the King in the North. And then here's where I want to really start opening up it for like some group discussion, because we get some really, really awesome meetups. As they walk to the dragon pit, we see Jorah explain why they pitted the dragons. We see Tyrion, Bronn, and Pod meet up and have some conversation. We see the Lannister guards ask the Hound what the hell's in the damn box. And then we have Brienne and the Hound share pleasantries about Arya. So what do we take away here?
I want to jump in real quick, because before we get there, after Cersei talks to the Mountain about who to kill and says, after that I don't care, like, do what you want, you can see this disconnected look on Jaime's face. And I think that's the first moment in this episode where he's like, all right, you're like super focused on just killing people and getting what you want. Like, you're not seeing the whole picture here.
Really thought you were going to say disconnected look on the Mountain's face. I was really intrigued where you're going there on that one.
He's always got a blank stare.
I want to, if we're just like picking shots, like shooting at flying discs. What are those called? Skeets? Yeah. We're just skeet shooting at that scene.
Skeet.
Yeah, pick one.
I think the Brienne and Hound scene was just adorable. Like, I loved that. Like, I thought it was so cool. And I think we all watching it together were all like in a unanimous word, like, oh, that was nice. Like, the fact that they had to do a lot of catching up. I mean, like I was curious how the Hound and Arya were going to be reunited, if only by name. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I necessarily anticipated them getting together, like in the same scene, but like the idea that Arya was still on the top of the Hound's mind is refreshing. That like we didn't lose the Hound that we had 2 seasons ago when he went through that whole like rebirth. I mean, if that's fair to say, he still, very much treasures the time that he had with Arya and looks back on it fondly. Like, we got a lot of answers from that scene that the Hound that we used to know doesn't hold a grudge. He's not holding a grudge against Brienne. He's not holding a grudge against Arya. He knows that he was a shitty person. He's atoned for that. And the fact that he can look at the good in that situation and say, yeah, I'm glad that Arya's okay. That's good. And no, I don't blame you for trying to kill me. Like, we got a lot without having to say a lot in that scene.
For sure.
Yeah, the Hound's heart grew 10 sizes this day.
Well said. Yes.
It was odd how like proud they seemed of Arya. Where
Not
he was
really.
Like, absolutely. He's like, he asks like who's protecting her, and she goes, the only one who needs protecting is the one, who's fighting against her. And he's like, well, it won't be me. And he has like this smirk on his face. And it's like, he saw the little girl and now she's like this determined, and we'll find out later, assassin.
And I think he was a huge piece to her journey there, especially like surviving, in the journey that he took her on to get to where she did. I can totally see him having that kind of like favorite uncle almost, right? Like that grumpy uncle kind of role in her life a little bit there. For me, I think this, even taking it back to our conversation earlier around kind of character development and spending a little bit more time on scenes where, could you cut through it and do you really need it? Yeah, maybe not, but the Hound storyline for me in other seasons, I've been like, okay, move on. I really don't care. And Samwell Tarly, I'd even throw him in that group for me. It's just not been the most engaging. And I think we've even talked about Arya's storyline at times not being the most engaging. And I feel like the last episode and this episode, for me, really wrapped up the reason why we've spent so much time on some of it, because of that dialogue that we had between Brienne and the Hound, and the dialogue that we had last week between Tormund and the Hound. And, we wouldn't have had that moment of awe, right? And that's really sweet. Like this is really cool. Like to see these characters connecting, that would never have happened if they hadn't spent the time. And in the moment, it maybe didn't feel worth it. But now, like in this moment, seeing those characters coming together, it totally is. I completely want to go rewatch and see some of that build up now because I like want to go see what I missed because I wasn't paying attention.
And I agree. For a season that I feel like I personally have shit on for moving too fast, like there was great character beats that got us to care about that moment, and specifically with the Hound when he got back to